More than 3 decades on the bench in Providence taught me that cruelty does not always enter a courtroom wearing rage on its face. Sometimes it arrives in a tailored suit carrying an expensive briefcase, convinced that money can silence pain. But that morning, even I was not prepared for Richard Vance. He was a wealthy landlord, broad-shouldered, polished, and impatient. And standing across from him was Eleanor Higgins, an 80-year-old widow whose hands trembled as she held the wooden rail for support. She was not there for revenge. She was not there to make a scene. She was there because, in the coldest week of January, the man who owned her building had taken away the one thing every human being deserves in winter heat. And when she begged him to turn it back on, he looked down at her frail body and screamed, "Go to hell." The courtroom went still before the case had even truly begun. There are moments when the air changes, when everyone in the room understands that this is no longer just a municipal violation. This was about dignity, this was about power, and this was about what happens when a man believes the people beneath him are too weak to matter. The clerk called the case. Richard Vance rose immediately. His charcoal suit looked like it cost more than some people's monthly income. He walked to the podium with the irritated confidence of a man who believed the courtroom was wasting his time. He did not look nervous. He looked annoyed. Then Mrs. Higgins stepped forward. She moved slowly, carefully, the way people move when life has already taken too much from them. Her coat was old but clean. Her face carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent a lifetime doing everything right, only to be punished in the final years of it. The prosecutor handed me the file. The complaint was simple, but the truth behind it was not. A leaking pipe had damaged Mrs. Higgins' apartment. She called her landlord several times. He ignored her, so she called the city inspector. And after the inspector left, Richard Vance came to her door, furious that one of his tenants had dared to involve the authorities. According to the complaint, he shut off the heat in the building during a freezing winter emergency. His lawyer stood first. He was smooth, polished, and prepared. He told the court that Mr. Vance was following an emergency maintenance procedure. He claimed the heat had only been turned off temporarily to prevent further water damage. He suggested that Mrs. Higgins, because of her age, may have misunderstood how long the heat was off. In other words, he tried to turn a frightened elderly widow into the problem. I have heard lies in court before. I have heard them wrapped in legal language, softened by expensive suits, and presented as reasonable explanations. But this was different. This was not just a defense. It was an attempt to erase a woman's suffering. While his attorney spoke, Vance checked his gold watch. That small movement told me more than his lawyer ever could. A woman stood feet away from him, trembling as she remembered one of the coldest nights of her life, and he was worried about the time. I looked at Mrs. Higgins. "Mom," I said gently, "take your time. Tell me what happened." She leaned toward the microphone. Her voice was thin but steady. "Your Honor, the pipe broke on Tuesday morning. Dirty water came through and ruined my rugs. My husband bought me those rugs before he passed. I called Mr. Vance 3 times, but he never answered, so I called the city." She paused to breathe. "When the inspector left, Mr. Vance came to my apartment. He didn't knock. He pounded on the door. When I opened it, he stepped into the hallway and stood over me. The courtroom was silent. He told me that if I liked calling the city, I could call them about the heat too. 10 minutes later, the radiators went cold. It was 9 degrees outside that night. I slept in my winter coat under 3 blankets. I was praying I would wake up in the morning. I let her words sit in the room. Sometimes silence is more powerful than any question a judge can ask. In that silence, every person in the courtroom understood what had happened. This was not maintenance. This was punishment. This was a landlord using winter like a weapon against an old woman whose only crime was asking for help. I turned to the prosecutor. "Was the apartment temperature documented?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said, sliding the report forward. Emergency service responded the next morning after a neighbor requested a wellness check. The interior temperature of Mrs. Higgins' apartment was 42 degrees. 42 degrees. A wave of shock moved through the gallery. People shifted in their seats. Some gasped. Others stared at Richard Vance with open disgust. For the first time that morning, he stopped checking his watch. "Mr. Vance," I said, keeping my voice calm, "did you hear what this woman said? Did you intentionally leave an 80-year-old widow in a freezing apartment in the middle of winter?" He stepped to the microphone and adjusted his tie. Your Honor, as my attorney explained, this was an emergency maintenance protocol. The pipes were compromised. I stopped him. I am not asking you about pipes. I am asking you about humanity. When Mrs. Higgins begged you for heat, did you shout those words at her? His face tightened. She was harassing me, he said. I manage a multi-million-dollar property portfolio. I don't have time to be bothered every time a tenant has a little problem. Maybe I lost my temper, but frustration is not a crime. There it was, not regret, not shame, entitlement. He believed his money made him important. He believed her poverty made her small. And worst of all, he believed that because she needed him, he had the right to humiliate her. Colorful language, I repeated, staring at him. That is what you call it? You shut off heat to an elderly woman's home, left her in 42-degree air, and told her to go to hell. His lawyer started to rise. But I held up my hand. No, I want him to hear this. I leaned forward. Mr. Vance, you did not simply lose your temper. You used your position to terrorize a vulnerable person. You thought she was too old, too poor, and too weak to fight back. The lawyer quickly tried to repair the damage. Your Honor, Mr. Vance is prepared to pay the maximum fine today. He is also willing to compensate Mrs. Higgins for any damaged property. We want to resolve this matter and move forward. He reached toward his briefcase as though a check could clean the stain from the morning. Put the briefcase down, I said. This is a courtroom, not a payment window. You cannot purchase your way out of the human cost of what happened here. Then I turned back to Mrs. Higgins. You mentioned the rugs your husband bought. Tell me about him. She seemed surprised that anyone wanted to know. Then a small, painful smile touched her face. His name was Arthur, she said. He worked at the naval shipyard for 42 years. He worked double shifts so we could keep that apartment. He always told me, Eleanor, as long as we have a roof and a warm hearth, we are the richest people in Providence. Her voice shook. He bought me those wool rugs for our 50th anniversary so my feet wouldn't get cold in winter. They were the last gift he gave me before he died. The courtroom became completely still. I looked at Vance. Do you hear that? Arthur Higgins worked for 42 years to give his wife a warm home. And because your pride was bruised, you tried to freeze her out of it. You did not just shut off a valve. You attacked the last safe place her husband built for her. Vance stared down at the floor, but pride is stubborn. And moments later, he lifted his head. Judge, he said, his voice colder now, I run a business, I provide housing. If tenants want control over my properties, they can buy their own. I said I'll pay the fine. What more do you want? That sentence revealed everything. He did not see people. He saw rent checks. He did not see homes. He saw assets. To him, the law was just a list of fees. And cruelty was acceptable as long as he could afford the bill, so I asked him one question. Mr. Vance, is your mother alive? He blinked, caught off guard. Yes, she lives in Florida. Then imagine this, I said. Imagine your mother's heat fails in January. She calls her landlord for help. Instead of helping her, he pounds on her door, towers over her, screams at her, and shuts off the heat. Imagine your mother sitting in the dark under blankets, breathing cold air, wondering if she will live until morning. He said nothing. What would you want done to that landlord? Still nothing. You would want him held accountable, I said. You would want the court to treat him like a man who endangered your mother's life. But because Eleanor Higgins is not your mother, because she is only a tenant to you, you think a check makes it disappear. The gallery was silent. Even the courthouse radiators seemed loud in that quiet. I turned to the prosecutor. What is the maximum penalty? $1,000 per day, Your Honor, plus full restitution. Vance's attorney reached for his pen. Keep the pen in your pocket, I said. The fine is only the beginning. I looked directly at Richard Vance. I find you fully responsible. You will pay the maximum municipal fine. You will fully reimburse Mrs. Higgins for every damaged item, including the rugs her husband bought her. But money will not teach you the lesson this courtroom requires. His face changed. You are also ordered to complete 200 hours of community service with the Providence Winter Heating Assistance Coalition. You will not sit in a heated office doing paperwork. You will answer emergency calls from elderly citizens whose heat has failed. You will listen to their fear. You will hear the voices of people who do not know if they will survive the night. And you will help the exact people you tried to freeze out. A low murmur moved through the courtroom. For once, Richard Vance had no answer. Moments passed. Court continued as it always does, Tickets, disputes, violations, hard luck, bad choices. Some cases do not leave you, they follow you. At the 60-day review, I received a report from the heating assistance director. I expected Vance to resist. Men like him try to turn punishment into a donation. But the order was clear. He had to serve in person. The report said he arrived on his first day wearing expensive clothes and a bitter expression. He sat at a folding table in a cramped basement office with a cheap headset and a list of emergency procedures. At first, he was stiff and cold. He treated each caller like a business problem. Then, on his third weekend, he answered a call that changed him. An 84-year-old woman named Martha had lost her heat. Her space heater had blown a fuse. She was alone in the dark, crying so hard she could barely speak. She told him she was afraid to fall asleep because she did not know if she would wake up. This time, Richard Vance could not shout. He could not threaten. He could not throw money at the problem and leave. He stayed on the phone for 45 minutes. He kept her talking. He promised help was coming. He did not hang up until the emergency worker walked through her door. And when the call ended, the director wrote that Richard Vance removed his headset, covered his face with both hands, and silently wept. That is when punishment became something deeper. A fine can hurt a bank account. Jail can restrain a body. But sometimes justice must reach the soul. That night in a cold basement, Richard Vance finally understood that his decisions were not numbers on a spreadsheet. They were human lives. 6 months later, a letter arrived on my desk. It was handwritten. No lawyer, no corporate letterhead, no polished language. Vance wrote that his 200 hours were complete, but he could not walk away. He said he still heard the voices of elderly people crying in the dark. He said that for the first time in his career, he understood that the most valuable things in his buildings were not brick, steel, or rent payments. They were the people inside. He created an emergency winter maintenance fund for his properties. No senior citizen in any of his buildings would wait more than 2 hours for a heating repair, no matter the hour or cost. He named it the Arthur Fund, after the shipyard worker who spent his life making sure his wife had a warm home. I did not call Richard Vance to congratulate him. Courts do not hand out medals because a man finally learns basic decency. But I did smile because that is what real justice can do. It does not simply punish cruelty. It forces cruelty to look in the mirror. It strips arrogance of its protection. It reminds power that there are limits. I did not save Richard Vance. Mrs. Higgins did. Her dignity did. Her courage did. The voices of frightened elderly people on those winter calls did. My job was only to make sure money did not bury the truth, because justice does not end when the gavel falls. Sometimes that is exactly where it begins.